found it rather interesting that a little while ago Bill Gates admitted that there was actually nothing to worry about as far as man-made global warming is concerned. It also struck me that I'd not heard little Miss Thunberg performing and complaining about man-made global warming either. But one thing I have noticed is that for a year or two there have been reports of extremely cold winters all over the world. And this year seems to be particularly chilly. Of course, if you rely on the New World Order's obedient media, you may have only been told a watered-down version. It's not really very good for their favourite story. There are so many people today whose living depends on the global warming story that they're afraid that people will learn the truth. But despite their efforts, Russia in particular has been in the news. We've seen headlines like, "Record snowfall buries Russia." This Russian city just had its heaviest snowfall in 60 years. Snowfall breaks a 140-year record. Record snowfall triggers a snow disaster in Russia's Kamchatka, burying towns and reaching second-floor apartments. Russia hit by snow apocalypse as record snow buries towns. Russia faces its heaviest snowfall in 146 years as cities and high-rise buildings are buried under meters of snow. And extreme snow buried an entire town, turning streets into treacherous trenches. Could you survive this? The rest of Europe has also been having bad winters for a couple of years.
Europe, January 7th, 2026. Europe, buried under record snowstorms. As heavy snowfall and freezing temperatures spread across multiple countries, transportation systems were paralyzed. From France and the Netherlands to the Balkan region, authorities have issued continuous warnings about serious risks related to snow, ice, and strong winds in the coming days. The impact of the severe winter weather quickly spread to the aviation sector. Authorities estimate that approximately 40% of flights at Roissy-Charles de Gaulle Airport and 25% of flights at Orly Airport will be unable to depart or land during the day, leading to prolonged passenger congestion. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, extreme weather conditions also caused casualties. Hundreds of flights were canceled at Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam as airport staff continuously cleared runways and de-iced aircraft. In Italy, Rome Mayor Roberto Gualtieri issued an order on January 6th restricting public access to parks and other potentially unsafe areas.
Europe's biggest snow. 2026 Europe. Euronews, 4 dead, hundreds of thousands, no power. Winter forecast, pattern suggests record snowfall. Snow in Bulgaria, snow in Lorraine, snow in Munich, and snow throughout Britain.
Temperatures recorded this week are the lowest since the start of winter and are expected to fall even further during the nights ahead. A snow warning is in effect for Wales, southeastern England, western England, and the Midlands. In addition, the United Kingdom Health Security Agency has extended an amber cold weather health alert for all of England. The agency warns that prolonged cold conditions could significantly impact health and social care services and increase the risk of deaths. Transportation systems across the United Kingdom continue to face severe disruption. Hundreds of schools in northern Scotland have closed for the third consecutive day as continuous snowfall leaves many rural areas completely isolated. Road, rail, and air travel remain widely disrupted, with some rail lines forced to shut down due to thick snow covering the tracks.
And of course, we've been seeing plenty of excessive snow in America for the last 2 years also. And the snow's been very widespread, with headlines like, "Winter storm paralyzes 6 states across America." "Snow records broken in USA." 60 million Americans in 18 states struck by historic snowstorm. Records in Nova Scotia, Oregon, Georgia. It might come as a bit of a surprise to find Texas being buried in deep snow, or California. We expect plenty of snow in the high Sierra Mountains, but not in the little towns near Sacramento. When they get snow, it's often in March and April, so this year's snow has hardly arrived yet, even though in the high Sierra they've already had plenty. Last year, members of the emergency services made a video of their labours to save roofs from collapsing under the weight of the heaviest falls of snow ever recorded.
We got Alex, supervisor. We got all of our guys from Sacktown. We're coming over here to get this pool emergency exit cleared out while we're waiting. Those are tall walls.
Pretty
Wow. So yeah, we're gonna get this emergency exit cleared out. All right, so we got the Sacramento guys down here. What's up, guys? We're getting all this snow off this roof over here at the village. We're on an emergency call out.
At the end of the first day, they went home, and it snowed again in the night. They had to go back to the same roofs the next day.
It's dumping, guys. I mean, and we are just getting dumped on. Well, as you can see here, we definitely got a lot more than 16 inches.
So the hard part about this is figuring out where exactly am I going to put this snow. We got to get as much of this weight off tonight as possible. We'll be going for a couple more hours.
But it's not only Europe and America which are experiencing exceptionally cold winters. I wonder how many people would have expected India Today to carry the headline, "From Delhi to Moscow to New York, why is the world so cold in 2026? One doesn't usually think of Delhi being a cold place. The Himalayas usually have plenty of snow in the winter, but this year the foothills are getting covered with snow much earlier than usual. Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan in central India face the third coldest winter in 110 years, and the records are being broken in South America. And perhaps for many people a big surprise might be South Africa. Even major transport routes can be brought to a standstill. This was the worst snowfall in South Africa for 85 years. So cold winters are not just from Delhi to Moscow and New York. They're just about everywhere. And the man-made global warming promoters are having to make up stories to try to save their story. And of course, the belief that man is in charge of our world and all that goes on in it means their stand is really not surprising. The Humanist Manifesto tells us, humanists believe that the responsibility for our lives and the kind of world in which we live is ours and ours alone. The fact that the creator of all things made the sun to rule the day, not man, simply cannot penetrate their humanist ideology. They just have to put man in the centre of everything. Now, I wonder how many of us remember the stories that Al Gore and his friends who started the man-made global warming scare and the United Nations Intergovernmental Convention on Climate Change were telling us 40 years ago. In just a couple of decades, the Arctic and Antarctic ice would be almost gone. Polar bears would be close to extinction. Much of Florida would be submerged in rising seawater. There would be no more snow on Mount Kilimanjaro. Hurricanes would be more violent and more frequent. Well, I wonder if anyone who does not have very sensitive measuring instruments can tell if sea level rise has occurred anywhere, including Florida. There are places where land has gone down because of pumping out lots of groundwater or oil or gas. But sea level rise? There are more polar bears now than there were in the 1990s, and the climate activists are having to make up excuses for their increasing numbers. There are serious suggestions that they may need to be culled because now there are too many of them. Measurements have shown that hurricanes are not more powerful and not more frequent than they were in the 1990s. And Kilimanjaro still looks pretty much the same as usual. But the really amazing thing is that millions of poor misled people still believe those man-made climate change stories. Even when they tell us that cold winters with record snowfalls must be a result of man-made global warming. As we saw in episode 93 and 94, Earth's climate is ruled by the sun. That's been known for centuries. The sun's variability leads to temperature cycles. Those cycles are not regular. They may be long or short duration. Temperature records have been reconstructed back to about 2,000 years ago. From that time, we see the temperature rising and falling, with the time from peak to peak varying from about just under 50 years to just over 150 years. From about 500 AD to about 600 AD, we see a steady rise above the average temperature. For the next 600 years, the temperature stays above average in what's called the medieval warm period. This was a time of prosperity and plenty, with warm seas letting vast quantities of carbon dioxide come out of solution. Plants could photosynthesize very efficiently. With warmth making evaporation easier and supplying more water for clouds, agriculture flourished. Grapes were grown in profusion as far north as Scotland, Greenland was green with vegetation, and the Vikings settled there. But then the sun became less active. Temperatures fell, until by 1400 we entered what's known as the Little Ice Age. With colder seas, much of the carbon dioxide went back into solution. With less evaporation, rain diminished. Coupled with lower temperatures, crop production fell and famine became common. The Vikings had to abandon Greenland, which was no longer green, but white with snow. In about 1700 AD, the sun became more active again and temperatures rose. By 1800, the Little Ice Age was over. For more than 100 years, we seem to have been in a generally upward trend. But there was a downturn on the way. I was born in the Second World War, which started just at the peak after a warming cycle. Hitler wanted to invade Russia. He desperately needed oil for his war machine. He wanted access to the oil fields of the Caucasus. But he was scared of ending up like Napoleon, caught by the Russian winter. Hitler's weathermen had been keeping track of the Russian winters. They told him he'd nothing to worry about. The recent winters had been mild. He invaded in 1941 without knowing that the peak had been passed and the earth was cooling rapidly. His path to world domination was foiled by the return of the traditional Russian winter. He never reached the oil fields of Baku and Grozny. I was very young, but I remember how quickly everything cooled down. In 1947, a lake near the house where I lived froze to such a depth that barbecue fires made on the ice in the middle of the lake became the latest fashion. By the 1970s, there was a worldwide panic, and the climate experts were telling us that we were starting a new ice age. But in 1975 we reached the bottom and temperatures started to rise again. And then, in 1988, Al Gore and his New World Order friends came up with man-made global warming, as we saw in episode 93. We saw how effectively they used gullible people, like Little Miss Thunberg, to frighten the gullible people of the world to accept their devastating policies. But we saw in episode 94 that their story foundered.
A funny thing happened on the way to global warming. 3 funny things have happened on the way to global warming. 3 of them. First, the warming stopped. Imagine that. Second, the policy agenda of the climatistas, as I call them, or an even better term for the climate crusaders, is Thermageddonites. I didn't think of that. That's Britain's Lord Monckton came up with that, and I think that one's really good. But the policy agenda of the climatistas has been revealed to be completely absurd. The third funny thing that has happened is something that no one predicted, and that's the revival of the oil and gas energy sector through the technological revolution of directional drilling and rock massaging. That's what I call fracking, rock massaging. And if our political class in Washington and the media had known this was going on, they surely would have done something to stop it. And that's what they're trying to do now, of course, but it's too late. It's too much momentum. Aren't markets and innovation wonderful? So let's take these in order. First, about the warming stopping. Between roughly 1978 and 1998, a 20-year period, the catastrophic global warming scenario seemed to have some evidence on its side. During that roughly 2-decade period, the global average temperature rose suddenly and sharply by about 0.4 of a degree Celsius. And conveniently, that was right in line with what a lot of the newfangled computer climate models predicted. But then, as we say, the funny thing happened. It suddenly stopped, even though greenhouse gases kept rising in the atmosphere at a steady rate. It is becoming the biggest embarrassment for the scientific consensus since Piltdown Man. You know, somebody today asked Ken Green about, or made reference to the email scandals of the East Anglia Climate Unit in 2009. There's one of those emails from climatologist Kevin Trenberth. He's one of the deep dish climate alarmists at Boulder. And he said in one of those emails, and I'll quote him here, he said it was a travesty that climate scientists could not explain the pause. They've been scrambling ever since to offer a whole series of explanations. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the UN's IPCC, as Ken mentioned today, they're doing their best to paper this all over and twist and shout and do everything they can to try and cover up the fact that their scheme is failing.
Stephen Hayward pointed out that global warming stopped at the turn of the century, and temperatures seemed to remain almost constant for about 15 years. Of course, we could have hoped that temperatures would trend up again, and the Earth might continue getting warmer, so that we might move back to the prosperity and plenty of a new medieval warm period. But judging by the last few winters, and judging by the headlines of the last few days, snow map shows blizzards spreading across UK. Massive winter storm cripples US life, leaving over 1 million without power. It's beginning to look as if we might not be so fortunate. And then those New World Order scientists might even have to invent a new ice age. In which case, I think we'll all be surprised to see how quickly we'll have a little Miss Somebody Else persuading us all to believe it. Deliver my soul, O Lord, from lying lips and from a deceitful tongue. The lip of truth shall be established forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment. Lying lips are abomination to the Lord, but they that deal truly are his delight. Thank you for joining me for this episode. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe and press the bell so that you'll be notified as I release new movies. If you'd like to support this project, you're welcome to do so through Patreon. Find a link on my channel banner and in the description below.